Hello everyone, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the Nürburgring, in the site of the Nürburg Castle then that looks down upon this fantastic circuit. We are here ready for the FIA Formula 3 European Championship Race 2 of this weekend. And I'd like to say we're greeted by sunshine, but although it's dry and there is some little hints of blue sky, it's certainly not as sunny and as dry as it was yesterday. Nonetheless, I'm sure we're in for a cracking race as the cars are lined up on the grid, and pole position goes the way of one Mr. Mick Schumacher, who's on a rich vein of form, it has to be said, and after his result yesterday, finds himself now in a very, very good position in terms of the Drivers' Championship, really chasing Dan Ticktum for the lead of that championship. There is Mick Schumacher then, the Prema Theodore driver, who yesterday did a fantastic job and ended up winning the race really rather comfortably. And he goes from pole position today, that 1:20.8 time, giving him P1. Alongside him then, the Russian driver supported by SMP Racing, also a Prema Theodore driver, Robert Schwartzman. Thumbs up from Robert Schwartzman then, a 1:20.892 gives him P2 on the grid for this second race of 3 across this weekend. So Robert Schwartzman, another one that should do very well from there. Dan Ticktum, we were having a discussion in the media centre earlier on about Dan Ticktum, and whilst his win rate is perhaps not as dominant as his points position would indicate, what he has done, he has banked points at every single opportunity and been very, very consistent. And that was true in qualifying, because he goes from P3 on the grid because he was third fastest. Then we find Marcus Armstrong, the Prema Theodore racer. Marcus Armstrong then going from the P4 place on the grid, so a second row start for Marcus Armstrong. Just look at the focus and the concentration on the eyes of Marcus Armstrong then. Ready to start this 33-minute race plus 1 lap. Then we see Alex Paulo driving for the high-tech Bullfrog GP team. Alex Paulo with a 1:20.972 finds himself P5 on the grid, so Alex Paulo could be a danger man from there. And alongside him, going from P6, it's another Prema Theodore racer, and that is the Estonian, that is Ralph Aron. And there is Ralph Aron, finished yesterday's race P5. So what can Ralph Aron do from P6 on the grid? So final instructions from engineer, wave from Ralph, and not far away from going racing. Then we find car number 23, which is that driven, the motor park car driven by Jonathan Aberdeen, who finished the race P8 yesterday, a 1:21.056 for Jonathan Aberdeen. Interestingly, when I walked past the motor park garage earlier, Jonathan Aberdeen was the only driver that was talking to the engineers in the garage. Really, really works hard, does Jonathan Aberdeen, in terms of data and relationship with the engineers. Sasha Fenestra, then the Carlin driver, goes from P8 on the grid. Real young talent is Sasha. And then it's Guan Yu Zhu, Ferrari Academy driver, of course. Guan Yu Zhu spends much of his life, of course, in Maranello. And the Prema Theodore racer Guan Yu Zhu, who, has to be said, we had very, very high hopes for Guan Yu Zhu this year. He's only taken one win, that of the opening round at the Po GP. First of 3 races there. Jury Vips, who coming into this round at the Nürburgring had put himself into a very good position with regards to the Drivers' Championship and had a rich vein of success. And this weekend, it's all gone really rather backwards for Jury Vips. He was taken out in race 1 yesterday through no fault of his own. He was a complete innocent bystander, and finds himself starting from P10 on the grid, so a 5th row start for Jury Vips. Race winner in Mazzano, of course. Sebastian Fernandez next on the grid then, in the car number 3. Sebastian Fernandez, another one of the Moto Park racers. He goes from P11 on the grid. Then Inem Ahmed, the high-tech Bullfrog GP driver, who is one of the more colourful characters, it has to be said, in the paddock. It's great fun to talk to Inem Ahmed, and has moments of absolute brilliance on the track, and then other moments where perhaps he doesn't perform quite to the ability that we know he has. So Inem Ahmed, then Ferdinand Habsburg, tallest driver on the grid, it has to be said, the Carlin driver, Ferdinand Habsburg, with a 1:21.517. He was also out of luck with a DNF yesterday. What is that? What's that say on his visor? It was supposed to be something. That's all we could see on the visor. Nikita Troitsky then, a Carlin driver. So Nikita Troitsky, who I saw wandering through the media centre a little bit earlier today, he goes from P14 on the grid, ahead of the Van Amersfoort racer, Kayvan Suri Andres. There is the Van Amersfoort racer then. Kayvan who drives car number 15 and actually starts from grid position 15, has had a podium this year, took a P3 at Nürburgring. That is only podium of the year. What can he do from there? Well, 33 minutes plus 1 lap, it's a long time. Marino Sato, then the motor park driver, the qualifying for this race, perhaps hiding the talent that we know Marino Sato has. He's going from P16 on the grid. So Marino Sato then, who has not yet taken a podium. He's come very, very close, taking a P4. But Gian Daravala, another one of those drivers that we expected really good things from in this season. Of course, back into the FIA Formula 3 Championship this season. Gian Daravala then going from P17 on the grid ahead of Fabio Scherer, the Moto Park racer, with a 1:21.642. That gave him P18 on the grid. So as you can hear, the engines have started and the formation lap is not far away, and then we will be on with 33 minutes plus 1 lap of this FIA Formula 3 European Championship. And the lady racer, Sophia Flörsch, then, who joined us from Zandvoort on, had tested Formula 3 cars during the course of the winter period. And then the deal didn't really come together for the beginning of the season, but delighted that she was able to join us from Zandvoort and stays with us, and she's going from P21 on the grid. So silence descends on the tarmac of the Nürburgring ahead of the start of this race then, the second of the 3 races, 2 races for the Formula 3 drivers today. And we're reaching the sharp end of the championship with the Red Bull Ring to follow this event here at the Nürburgring. And then, of course, the season finale to come at Hockenheim. So the car's off on their formation lap. This 3.629-kilometre circuit then. 11 turns, 7 of them right-handers, 4 of them are left-handers. And this is almost like a hairpin. You run downhill into turn number 1. You can see how it's been resurfaced on the inside. And that really is a pinch point right at the start of the race. And you can see the tarmac runoff area. And that is used fairly significantly, particularly on the opening lap when you get to all 22 cars all funneling into that turn number 1, that right-hander. So cars making their way through the sequence of early turns then. And we'll take a look at the Drivers' Championship in terms of the way it stands going into this race in just a few moments. One thing I can tell you is that Dan Ticktum's right at the top of the table. And let's take a look at the grid then as we run through, once again, the way they line up for race 2. Mick Schumacher and Robert Schwartzman on the front row ahead of Daniel Ticktum, the points leader, and Marcus Armstrong. Then it's Alex Paulo and Ralph Aron. Jonathan Aberdeen, Sasha Fenestras, Guan Yu Zhu, and Juri Vips ahead of Sebastian Fernandez, Inem Ahmed, Ferdinand Habsburg, Nikita Troitsky, Keivan Suri Andres, Marino Sato, Gian Daravala, Fabio Scherer, Ben Hinchley, Artem Petrov, rounding out the first 10 rows with Sophia Flörsch and Maya Vadyanathan, the Carlin racer, bringing up the last row of the grid. So I promised you that we would take a look at the Drivers' Championship. It's Dan Ticktum on the very top of the Drivers' Championship at the moment on 237 points, but there Mick Schumacher is coming calling. Of course, Dan Ticktum's very, very clever in terms of making sure that he banks points. Mick Schumacher going from pole position today, got the opportunity for maximum points, of course, but Dan Ticktum, you know, what he needs to do is just continue scoring points, and then that gap from 237 to 211 is at least maintained. So we will see come the end of the race exactly who has done what and where, but Mick Schumacher in a perfect position to perhaps make it 2 wins out of 2 starts here at the Nürburgring. Follows the success he's had, of course, at Silverstone and Spa, where he took a win in each of those events. And, of course, that win in the opening race at Misano in Italy. There is Dan Ticktum, the Drivers' Championship leader, and right ahead of him, that Mick Schumacher car. To the left-hand side of Mick, with the inside line with this staggered grid, is Robert Schwartzman. So we expect, when the lights go out, for Mick Schumacher to dive to the inside to protect that inside line going into turn number 1. Robert Schwartzman will, of course, be hoping to get a blistering start, but Schumacher's start yesterday was absolutely outstanding. There's René Rossin, the boss of the Prema Theodore team. We get the green flag from the marshal at the rear. Stand by, hold on to your hats. Here we go. When 5 lights are extinguished, let's go racing. The FIA Formula 3 European Championship Race 2 is underway. And once again, a good start from Dan Ticktum. It looks like it was a good start from Mick Schumacher as well. He closes the door on Robert Schwartzman now, so Schwartzman has to go around the outside. Ticktum very, very quick and almost into the side of Schwartzman. One of the cars has gone round, as is often the case. We've got another one in the gravel there, but we're keeping our eyes at the front. And look at this, Mick Schumacher stretching his legs already. It's Inem Ahmed who is out. So Inem Ahmed in the high-tech car is out already right at the start of the race. And I suspect where that car is situated, it might provoke a safety car. Couldn't quite see how much of the car was in the gravel or not. You'll recall yesterday's race, we got a safety car before even one lap had been completed. We'll keep our eyes on the timing screen and the message screen to see what happens, whether Ahmed's car is able to be recovered from there. So they stretch their legs, and yes, safety car has been called for. So a bit of a duplicate photocopy of yesterday's start then, really, because Inem Ahmed's car means that well, you have to feel a little bit for Mick Schumacher, who, going from pole position today, did everything right. Of course, yesterday, he got the blistering start and got it into P1. But, of course, the margin he had has been, yes, all of Inem Ahmed's car, regrettably, is in the gravel, and Inem is still in the cockpit of the car. He'll be absolutely furious. Hopefully, we'll get a replay to find out exactly what happened there. But Inem Ahmed, clearly in the gravel. The car is not recovering from there. It's going to be, well, a DNF for Inem Ahmed, of course, took a P4 in the race yesterday, so he'll be bitterly, bitterly disappointed for that. I can remember Inem Ahmed at the Hungaroring was absolutely outstanding, and really the season has got away from him a bit, but we'll see. Of course, another race to come later this afternoon, so the car doesn't look to be significantly damaged, so hopefully the team will be able to put their car back into order again, and Inem Ahmed will take up his grid position for race number 3. But regrettably, for now, he's out of race 2. So safety car is leading the cars around the circuit, and here's a replay of the start then. And for my money, I think Schwartzman got just a little bit more traction than Schumacher, but Schumacher's car length ahead was enough to ensure that he could have that P1 place going into turn number 1. Trying to pick up on what happened to Inem Ahmed here. So as the cars make their way into turn 1 now, they always go 3, 4, 5 abreast, and well, there was you could see a lock-up. Well, to be fair, it was, goodness me, he's having no luck this weekend, is Juri Vips, that's for sure. And it rather looked like Inem Ahmed was on the inside of Juri Vips and locked up. And you can see then broke the track control arm on the front of his car. And Juri Vips, who, well, if he had any luck, it would be bad luck this weekend. He gets turned around once again. And the incident in turn 1 is under investigation. So the lights are off on the safety car, so the safety car is coming in, which means we can go back to racing. So Juri Vips, I think, is still out there. He's right at the back, so no damage to the Juri Vips car, but it's going to be hard work to get into the points from there. As Mick Schumacher backs them all up now. The one that looks pretty lively here is Dan Ticktum on potentially Robert Schwartzman, and also Marcus Armstrong on Dan Ticktum as they head in towards turn number 1 after they go down this downhill section on the start-finish straight. Then Mick Schumacher leads them away. Robert Schwartzman, then it's Dan Ticktum. Closest is Marcus Armstrong on Dan Ticktum. So Armstrong just takes a look at the inside, but he's not really close enough to be able to do so. So it's as we were then for the top 5 places as they run through turn number 2 now. Thankfully, we all go through the opening sequence of turns with no contact and no damage and no one off. So Mick Schumacher stretching his legs once again from Robert Schwartzman. Then it is Dan Ticktum. A big battle going on with Fenestras there. There is Robert Schwartzman. There is Dan Ticktum. Look at this. Almost 3 abreast. Guan Yu Zhu is in that mix as well with Jonathan Aberdeen too and Sasha Fenestras. So a long way around the outside, but prepared to stick it out and go for it across the grass and the curbs and the rumble strips. It matters not. Look at them. Side by side. Fantastic fight going on here with Sebastian Fernandez. Well, that was absolutely supreme to watch. Didn't pay off in the end, but nonetheless, great race action in the Formula 3 as the cars make their way towards and through the chicane now. So a good bit of defensive driving there, making sure that that inside line into the NGK chicane was protected. Here is our race leader, Mick Schumacher, leading from Robert Schwartzman. Then it is Dan Ticktum, and then it's Marcus Armstrong ahead of Ralph Aron and Alex Paulo, Jonathan Aberdeen. Then it's Fenestras and Fernandez and Guan Yu Zhu rounding out the points-paying positions at the moment in P10. So from turn 1 to turn number 2 then, as the camera tracks around, and we maintain our look at the front of the field of this Formula 3 European Championship race. Schumacher, Schwartzman and Ticktum. So Schumacher then doing a very, very good job. He's extended his lead to 1 second. And this was the fight that was going on with the Sacha Fenestras and the number 3 car of Sebastian Fernandez. And that was really, really enjoyable to watch. Now, a couple of cars under investigation for jump start here. Interestingly, Sebastian Fernandez, who we were just talking about, and also the Marino Sato car, under investigation for potential jump start. Any more information on that, of course, we will bring it to you. Fastest lap comes from Mick Schumacher, a 1:22.039, as he extends that margin of comfort between himself and Robert Schwartzman ahead of Dan Ticktum. Ticktum was 7/10 down on Robert Schwartzman. Schumacher, well, he's extending his lead as they head towards breaking the timing beam now. Schumacher's gap is extended it by another 3/10. And all of a sudden, Ticktum has just left Armstrong in his wake as well. Because at one point, Armstrong was pretty close to Dan Ticktum in that P4 position, but that's not the case now. So cars all spreading themselves out, and Schumacher just doing everything that he needs to do, nailing every single turn, and just focusing on maintaining and or increasing that gap between himself and the P2 driver. Of course, Dan Ticktum, as we saw just as we went into the race, with a healthy lead in the Drivers' Championship. And really, for the likes of Mick Schumacher and those that are chasing in the championship, what they need is for Dan Ticktum to fall over. But he's such a clever racer, and he knows banking points, and just consistency in terms of point scoring will be enough. Of course, Red Bull supported driver, and with that Red Bull support, it has to be said, comes some pressure as well. Many of my colleagues have said that one day there'll be a book written about those drivers that had Red Bull support and lost it, but have still made very successful careers. So it doesn't mean it's all over, but Dan Ticktum enjoying that Red Bull support at the moment, and there's been many conversations about where we may see Dan Ticktum racing next season. But of course, before we get to that, he wants to win the FIA Formula 3 European Championship, and at the moment in this race he's P3. Schumacher is was 1.3 and has extended it by another 4/10. You see, Schumacher is just doing it, isn't he? Every sector he's quickest. So the jump starts have been deemed to be not jump starts, so they were investigated. And if I can explain, it's not a question of eyesight. There are sensors all over the grid boxes, and all the data is available to the race control and the stewarding panel, so they know exactly if the car has moved by a millimetre before the lights have gone out. So there is quite a lot of science in it. So there is Ticktum, who for my money is just getting a little bit closer to Schwartzman. He's taken a 10th out of him. We are only talking about a 10th. It's, the margin between the two of them is 6/10 at the moment. So Schwartzman, like yesterday, under a bit of pressure, but he seemed to soak it all up in race 1, and see no reason why he won't be able to do that in race 2 as well. So it's another fastest lap from Mick Schumacher on lap 5, a 1:21.471. The boy's on fire at the moment, and he's just gone through the sector quickest of anyone once again. So, you know, this is a real emerging talent. There's no question about that. Of course, this weekend he actually tested a DTM car as well. Please don't read anything into that other than it was a test. 1.7 seconds between Schumacher and Schwartzman. Schwartzman responding in the final sector, to be honest. So Schumacher, Schwartzman, Ticktum, Armstrong, Aron, Paulo. Then it's Jonathan Aberdeen, Sacha Fenestras, Sebastian Fernandez. Then it's Guan Yu Zhu rounding out the points-paying positions at the moment for Prema Theodore Racing. So Schumacher then, you just watch him. He's very, very focused, knows exactly what he needs to do, and he's not phased at all. Of course, he's far enough ahead of Robert Schwartzman that even were he to make a minor error, it wouldn't matter. But he just doesn't make errors. It's almost clinical to watch him when he's out on his own and just has the tarmac in front of him. He is an absolute perfectionist. So Mick Schumacher then around the kink, which is turn at number 8, heading up towards the NGK chicane. And here we can see in super slow-mo the focus and the concentration, the way he just dials the car in. It is a joy to behold. So Mick Schumacher leading the race from Robert Schwartzman and Dan Ticktum. You can see the front end plate almost touching the tarmac there. In places, the Nürburgring is quite undulating. We've seen patches of new tarmac. It's a relatively smooth and flat surface, and Hankook tell me it offers medium stress in terms of the tyre construction. So maintains the gap at 1.7 seconds as they go across that sector line. There is Dan Ticktum then, who you just feel also, whilst he's not encroaching too much on Robert Schwartzman, Armstrong isn't getting any closer to him, so you just feel that Daniel Ticktum is just being very sensible here and thinking, oh, as Gian Daravala has a go at Juri Vips, and Juri Vips responds. Juri Vips, who once again was taken out in turn 1, he does lose out to Gian Daravala, but now he comes back at him. This is a real overtake, and Juri Vips, the young Estonian racer that was a race winner in Misano, and Gian Daravala, one of the more experienced Formula 3 racers, not only using the tarmac, but the white lines, the grass, and the rubble as well. And Vips all over the back of the Carlin car of Gian Daravala, trying to find a way past even the back end of Juri Vips' car, stepping out there. And, of course, he's now becoming potentially vulnerable to Amaya Vadyanathan, who is right behind him. So Juri Vips having to really get back up the order again if he possibly could, following that first lap incident, which really took him out. But you can see just how far those three are away from the rest of the pack, running in P18, 19 and 20. Inem Ahmed, the only car that we've lost out of the race so far. And given the contact on the Juri Vips car, I'm surprised that the car is still okay, but perhaps it's not performing quite up to 100%, which may explain where some of Vips' pace has gone away. So there is the Gian Daravala car then, car number 9. Juri Vips is really staying with him now. Is he going to have a go going into turn number 1? Don't think it's close enough. There is the lady racer, Sophia Flörsch then, for Van Amersfoort Racing. And now, looks like Sophia Flörsch got turned around there. We can just see from that very high shot how Sophia Flörsch was turned around, ended up still pointing in the right direction. Here you can see it again, a really rather nifty pirouette. And a complete 360 means engage first gear and off you go again. So Sophia Flörsch then put back. It's all part of the learning experience in Formula 3. And Sophia Flörsch, who joined the season from Zandvoort on, chasing down Amaya Vadyanathan now in the number 24 car. Now that incident between Juri Vips and Sophia Flörsch is going to be investigated after the race. So, arguably for all the wrong reasons, Juri Vips has been right in the mix of it, hasn't he? But right in the mix of it, right at the back of the pack. He's running in P19 at the moment. Meantime, Schumacher has lost a 10th from Robert Schwartzman. Whether it was just one apex not being nailed absolutely correctly, or whether it was Schwartzman just being a little bit quicker. In fact, on the last lap, Schumacher was still quicker than Schwartzman. This is Gian Daravala and Juri Vips and Amaya Vadyanathan and Sophia Flörsch. This four-way battle that is going on at the moment for P18. The car ahead of them is Nikita Troitsky, who's some distance ahead as well, some 2.8 seconds over and above these four that are racing here. So Sophia Flörsch, of course, racing for the Netherlands-based Van Amersfoort Racing Concern. Team headed by Fritz Van Amersfoort. And this super slow-mo in replay of Sophia Flörsch, the lady racer, working hard at that number 25 car, and this her first season in the FIA Formula 3 European Championship. She's a real gutsy fighter, I have to say, since some fantastic races with Sophia Flörsch in a previous category, which was the German Formula 4 Championship. So they crossed the timing line once again. It was 1.6 seconds last time between Schumacher and Schwartzman, and he's just responded, and it's now 1.8 seconds. So it's all completely and totally under control for Mick Schumacher, you have to say. So too for Robert Schwartzman, Dan Ticktum, Marcus Armstrong. And they're all really rather frustratingly gapped out. So there's not a heck of a lot going on, which is why some of our focus has been on that battle for P18. There we can see the number 15 car of Kayvan Suri Andres, and there is Gian Daravala and Juri Vips, and this is our race leader Mick Schumacher then. really helping his cause towards chasing down that Drivers' Championship, of course, that championship being led by Dan Ticktum, who, frustratingly for Schumacher, is running in P3, so Ticktum will bank a haul of points. Not as many as Schumacher, but again, it will ensure that he maintains a margin. So there you can see the little cut through as you join this. There are various configurations of the Nürburgring track. This is one that's always been preferred by Formula 3 and also the DTM. The number 13 car of Fabio Scherer, the Moto Park racer, who was chasing down the number 12 car, of course, of Artem Petrov, who races for Van Amersfoort. Just ahead of him is Kayvan Sturi-Andres running in P14. So Schumacher, Schwartzman, Ticktum, and Schumacher just another 3/10. Thanks very much, rubs his hands with invisible soap and says this is all going really rather nicely. But we still have 17 minutes plus one lap of this race. And this is Juri Vips then, the Estonian racer, car number 44 for Moto Park then, who is sadly way down the order. It'll be a no-point score for Juri Vips. I remind you what I said at the beginning of the program, coming into this race, he was really doing some chasing in terms of the Drivers' Championship. And now it really has. This has been a torrid weekend for him. Of course, he can put it all right in race number 3. And here's some super slow-mos of Juri Vips then, really throwing the car across the curbs. Really impressive to watch. So Juri Vips, though, without the position in the race that he really would have liked. It has to be said, qualifying was not good for him in terms of the pace that we know he has, but just for whatever reason, it's just not worked here at the Nürburgring. Mick Schumacher then maintains and increases his margin at the front. It's visible now, isn't it? You can see the number of car lengths between himself and Robert Schwartzman. He's just absolutely got it all together as we are 48 seconds away from reaching half distance. Dan Ticktum then, the championship prediction. The gap is narrowed between Dan Ticktum and Mick Schumacher, but again, it's the sizable chunks are not being made by virtue of the fact that even when Schumacher is winning, Ticktum is banking big points as well. So that was the championship prediction, should everything stay the way it is now. Bear in mind, we have got another 7 races to come after this one, so still plenty of time for all sorts of things to happen. Schumacher doing everything right, 2.3 seconds. The car just performing so well, and so too he as a driver. It's been a very good and busy weekend for Mick Schumacher, who has taken the opportunity to test a DTM car. There's Robert Schwartzman then, and the gap between Schwartzman and Ticktum, well, it is coming down, and we saw this yesterday with Ticktum sort of in the second half of the race, able to find something. The long race pace of the car, perhaps that number 27 car engineered by the Moto Park team, really coming good towards the end of the race. Whether he will be able to find a move on Robert Schwartzman is quite another matter, but certainly getting within shouting distance of perhaps being able to do so. So it'll be very interesting to keep an eye on that. Schumacher, Schwartzman, Ticktum, P1, P2, P3. Then it's Marcus Armstrong, Ralph Aron, then Alex Paulo, P6. Jonathan Aberdeen is P7. Then it's Finastra and Fernandez, with Guan Yu Su rounding out the points-paying positions in P10 at the moment. So super slow-mo of Dan Ticktum now. Is Schwartzman just beginning to look a little more ragged, perhaps? And this is just allowing Ticktum to get closer. Of course, as the tyres degrade over the course of the race, grip becomes more difficult to find, perhaps, and it's the first 4 cars that are all lapping in the 121s at the moment, and interestingly, the last lap, Mick Schumacher did a 121.7. Dan Ticktum a 121.6. So you can see why the gap is down to 7/10 between Schwartzman and Ticktum. As now under some pressure is Amaya Vadyanathan from Sophia Flörsch, who takes a look at the inside. You This is the fight that's going on for P20. So Amaya Vadyanathan in car number 24 then, who had, I think it was probably his best finish of the season yesterday, taking a P14. Now defending against the lady racer Sophia Flörsch in car number 25. So Amaya Vadyanathan then able to see off the challenge from the lady racer currently. They round the Coca-Cola turn now and head for the start-finish straight. Going downhill is Sophia Flörsch going to be able to get close enough to Amaya Vadyanathan to have a go going into turn number 1. So getting closer, closer, closer. We have a yellow flag in turn number 1, and the reason for that is... that has gone around as we zoom in and we can try and pick it up. It's Marino Sato, and he's actually going to get out of the car, I think, which will probably mean that that's got to be a safety car. So into the side of Ben Hingley. Ben Hingley gets airborne. Marino Sato goes around, damage to the front of the Marino Sato car, and a safety car has been deployed. Well, Marino Sato then gets away from the car. So Marino Sato, who was running in P13, Ben Hingley was P12. Safety car is called for. So you can see he was having a go at Ben Hingley, went up to the inside and connected with the Ben Hingley car. That launched the Hingley car. Ben Hingley is continuing, I think. There's the safety car to pick them all up. Now, this is really, really bad news for Mick Schumacher, who, of course, had built up that huge margin between himself and Robert Schwartzman. And we're into the closing third of the race, almost. We've got 11 minutes and 10 seconds, plus 1 lap, of course. And the Marino Sato's car is going to have to be recovered. Ben Hingley has come into the pit lane. So whether Ben Hingley will be able to continue in the race is under some question. There was the contact from Marino Sato on Ben Hingley then. So Marino was on the inside, Hingley to the outside. You can see how the energy forced through the cockpit of the car as Ben Hingley, of course, with belts as tight as they can be, and of course the hands device as well. And this is Marino Sato getting out of the car. His race done and dusted. It was at that stage not a points finish for either of them, but nonetheless they were clearly fighting hard. And Marino Sato then, it's the end of his race, and I really rather suspect it'll be the end of Ben Hingley's race as well. So on board the Motor Park garage there. And yeah, sure enough, it's a retirement for the number 77 car, Ben Hingley. So the high-tech GP driver is out of the race. And it was a P9 finish for Ben yesterday, and not in the points, and not even going to finish the race today. So he's certainly not in the temper to be talking to anybody. Up to the pit wall to take a look. Now, the contact that we saw between Ben Hingley and Marino Sato is going to be investigated after the race. So once they've recovered the Marino Sato car, I suspect we're going to get 1 more lap behind the safety car. Then that car will be recovered, and we can go back to racing again. It will be a fraught fight to the finish, I would think. Now, Schumacher is going to have to back them all up. Schwartzman, of course, would like to have a go at Schumacher. There's Rennie Rossen and the Prema Theodore pit wall. Ticktum, of course, would also like to have a go at Schwartzman, and Armstrong will feel that this is an opportunity that has been gifted from P4 as well to maybe find a podium out of this. So, all the cars will be bunched up together again. Second safety car of the race. You can almost feel the anger in Ben Hingley. So, as predicted then, the safety car is going to come in at the end of this lap. So, Ben has calmed down sufficiently now to have a conversation down there. So, the train of cars then making their way towards turn number 6 now behind the safety car, but the lights will go off on the safety car, and that will come in. And we will go back to racing once again. And as I say, it could be a fraught fight to the finish in this Formula 3 race. Sure enough, lights have been extinguished. And Schumacher then weaves from side to side and backs them all up. So into the NGK chicane then goes Mick Schumacher. And now floors the throttle. Once you've accelerated, you've got to stay accelerated, and the rest of the cars following through on the NGK chicane as they go around turn number 1 now. Mick Schumacher with another perfect restart, it has to be said, from that safety car. He's got 7.5 minutes plus a lap. Schumacher, Schwartzman, Ticktum, Armstrong, Aron, Paolo, Aberdeen, and Van Astraz then in P8. And the one that looks lively here is Ticktum, potentially on Robert Schwartzman. Maybe not close enough through turn number 1. Some bold moves there, and a bold move up the inside, potentially there from Fabio Scherer on Artem Petrov. That for P13 in the race. So around turn number 4 now the cars go. Following this second safety car period. Schumacher leading, Ticktum then takes a very, very wide line going into that turn, as do a number of other drivers. It's not necessarily always the line that every driver takes, but Ticktum looking very, very good and lively here. And of course, what he needs to do is try and find something to get on terms with Robert Schwartzman. Not quite been able to do that yet, but as they head into the chicane now, he gets ever closer, and it's often off the back of the chicane where you start setting up a potential move for turn number 1, truthfully. And let's see now that Schwartzman is just able to respond going into this downhill section. Meantime, further back, just to the outside there, and a bit of a lock-up. Runs wide. So for now, Alex Paolo and Jonathan Aberdeen, and trying to buy into that is Van Astraz as well in car number 11. So Sacha Van Astraz in the all-yellow car. It's looked lively during various moments of this race. And Guan Yu Zhou side by side with Sebastian Fernandez. Guan Yu Zhou runs the number 11 car of Sacha Van Astraz out onto the grass. And Ferdinand Habsburg then, the number 62 car, battling with Sebastian Fernandez, and Ferdinand Habsburg being able to take advantage of everything that's going on. And here comes Keivan Suri Andres now into the NGK chicane as they're all fighting down this number 3 car of Sebastian Fernandez. So up the inside now. So some really good, and this is what's sometimes advantageous, if you like, of a safety car, where it bunches all the cars up once again, and all those gaps are nullified. So the one that has reaped the most out of that potentially is Ferdinand Habsburg, who of course finds himself now in that P10 place, which means he'll at least bank a point for this. So, and you can also see the car of Gian Daravala, the all-pink machine, sort of at the back of that train of cars. Well, actually in the middle of that train of cars, as a number of others join in that snake, if you like. So, oh, and a big, big lock up there, and a huge mistake. Now, as we zoom into that particular car, we'll get a replay of that, and it's gone from bad to worse, hasn't it? For, I'm pretty sure that was Fernandez, but we'll hopefully get a replay of that. By virtue of the fact we're on the Motor Park pit wall, suggest it was potentially Sebastian Fernandez. Anyway, here is Dan Ticktum continuing to chase Robert Schwartzman. Mick Schumacher is escaping up the road. It was 1.5 seconds. It's now 2 seconds. So Schumacher has done a supreme job following 2 safety cars. So Schumacher, Schwartzman, Ticktum, Armstrong, Aron, Paolo, Aberdeen, Zhou, Van Astraz, then Ferdinand Habsburg. And sure enough, it is Fernandez. So here we can see the number 3 car. Now, this was earlier on when through all the dust and the gravel went the Sasha Fenestras car. Really pushed rather wide there. And Ferdinand Habsburg fighting as well. And that was the huge lockup. And it was just going to be impossible to turn right. And therefore, the number 3 car, well, to be fair, that perhaps explains some of it then. The back end of the car would certainly not respond because the tyre was completely deflated. So a great shame, involved in some fantastic action there. Well, you cannot not be impressed by the restart of Mick Schumacher, who has done a brilliant job. So Ticktum now as close to Schwartzman as he's been. But Ticktum now with just 2 minutes plus 1 lap remaining. If he spots and sees an opportunity where the overtake is almost a given, then I would think he's going to go for it. Failing that, he's going to bank the points for P3. But he takes a look at the inside, shows his face to the inside of the Robert Schwartzman car. But Schwartzman puts the car exactly where he needs to. But Ticktum is really pounding the pressure on now. Now, we did see yesterday that Schwartzman was and had this unerring ability to be able to soak up the pressure. And whether he can do that over the closing stages of this race once again. So there is our race leader, Schumacher, 2.1 seconds to the good. Of course, these two are falling further behind now by virtue of the fact that they are fighting together. That, of course, slows them. Is it allowing Marcus Armstrong to get on the back of Dan Ticktum? Well, actually, no, it's not. In fact, Armstrong and Aron are still, they're second or so behind. So Ticktum is not threatened by anyone immediately behind him, which means he's able to focus on trying to chase Schwartzman and, more importantly, to try and get Schwartzman to make a mistake. But he's not done that. And he doesn't. You can see Schwartzman there just taking a look in the rearview mirror to see exactly where Ticktum was positioning the car. Schwartzman puts it through the NGK chicane. So too does Ticktum. Does Ticktum get a slightly better exit? I'm not sure. Around the Coca-Cola turn. So, Robert Schwartzman, P2, Dan Ticktum, P3. We've got this lap and one more. And this time, Ticktum is ever closer to Robert Schwartzman. This is the fight that's going on for P2. He looks at the inside once again and thinks better of it. Schwartzman has got it all completely under control, though, and is able to put the car and position the car absolutely perfectly, so he's not threatened. So Guan Yu Zhu, who we saw just a few moments ago, is under investigation for a potential dangerous maneuver. As I say, he's under investigation for that at the moment, but we're staying with this battle that is going on for P2 currently. So Schwartzman it is that's P2, but he's being chased by Dan Ticktum with 2 laps left to run in this second of the 3 Formula 3 races across the course of this weekend. Dan Ticktum, the points championship leader, is being chased in the championship by Mick Schumacher, who is leading this race by some 2.7 seconds. Ticktum knows that if he could bank P2 rather than P3, of course, it is more points for him. However, P3 is better than a DNF. Therefore, he's not going to attack too hard. He's only going to go for the overtake if he feels it's really on. And for my money, on this lap, Ticktum is not as close to Schwartzman, and I really rather think that he's resigned himself to, do you know what, let's bank this P3, as Armstrong is just beginning to get a bit closer to Ticktum now, but it's all too late, I would suggest, with just 1 lap left to run. So Ticktum closes under braking, but as I say, Schwartzman appears to have it all completely under control. As does Schumacher, who extended his margin by another 10th, but then, of course, he would by virtue of the fact that these two fighting behind him means that he has the ability just to get up the road, because these two are slowing as they continue their fight, but the fight is not as intense as it was. So Dan Ticktum then, points championship leader, heading for another supreme banking of points, if you like, to maintain his position at the top. The margin will be narrowed between himself and Mick Schumacher, it has to be said. Schumacher is creeping closer, and the form that Mick Schumacher has shown over this weekend and over the last 2-3 race weekends is something to really take note of. So here comes Mick Schumacher then. He has one more turn to do, and it's going to be 2 out of 2 for Mick Schumacher. This will be, I think, his 5th, the race win as he takes the checkered flag. Mick Schumacher is a race winner. Robert Schwartzman takes P2, Dan Ticktum takes P3. Then it will be Marcus Armstrong and Ralph Aron for Prema Theodore. Alex Paulo, Jonathan Aberdeen, Guan Yu Zhu banks P8. P9 goes the way of Finastras. Then it's Ferdinand Habsburg rounding out the points-paying positions. So with a couple of safety cars to punctuate the race, so Sabina Kem then makes her way down to congratulate Mick on another race win and a supreme performance. Schumacher doing a fantastic job. 2 times from the safety car. He's had to restart the race, and of course would be under pressure. So it's exactly as we were with regards to the podium as it was in yesterday's race. Schumacher, Schwartzman, and Ticktum that we are going to see up there. Marcus Armstrong then banking that P4, 1 place better than he achieved yesterday. Schumacher absolutely delighted with the win. And here, in replay, he takes the checkered flag. Couple of shots of this because it was fantastic to see. And that's the shot I love. It's a slightly different line from Schumacher taking the checkered flag today, and Rennie Rossin, the team principal of Prema, then applauding Mick Schumacher's fine efforts. Very good job indeed. So Schumacher is a 2-time winner here at the Nürburgring. And a confirmation of the result on screen for you. Schumacher taking the win from Robert Schwartzman, Dan Ticktum, Marcus Armstrong, Ralph Aron, Alex Paulo, Jonathan Aberdeen, Guan Yu Zhu, Sasha Finastras, and then Ferdinand Habsburg, P10, rounding out the points-paying positions. So the rest of the order, as you can see on the screen. And, of course, the all-important Drivers' Championship, which, as I say, still being led. It will still be led by Dan Ticktum. However, getting ever closer is Mick Schumacher. So here it is then, 252 points to 236 now. The difference between Dan Ticktum and Mick Schumacher. Juri Vips still in P3, joined P3 with Marcus Armstrong. Then it's Ralph Aron and Inem Ahmed and Robert Schwartzman, Guan Yu Zhu. It's the fight at the front, isn't it, between Ticktum and Schumacher, which is ever enticing with regards to the drivers' points. Another race to come a little bit later this afternoon, where the grid is formed, of course, from the second fastest lap from qualifying, the qualifying session that took place yesterday. So cars will make their way into Parc Fermé. There is Dan Ticktum. And into the middle comes our race winner, Mick Schumacher. Stands atop the car. Well done, sir. So the Italian bravo, bravo, that we can hear. Did do a very good job, no question. So the podium is going to be identical to the one we saw yesterday. There's Robert Schwartzman. And there's Mick's manager. And there is Dan Ticktum. Receiving a handshake there from Rennie Rossin. Super slow-mos to the top 3 then. And first of all, P3 for Moto Park. It's Daniel Ticktum. P2 for the Prema Theodore racer, Robert Schwartzman. And the second win this weekend. 2 wins out of 2 starts here at the Nürburgring for Mick Schumacher. So the driver's being hustled up towards the podium as we speak. And there the cars parked up in the Parc Fermé area. And the podium being readied, as you can see, just above that Parc Fermé area. Drivers, of course, that we will be seeing in just a few moments on those steps of the podium. So another great win for Mick Schumacher. Schwartzman and Ticktum will be joining him on the podium. There is Dan Ticktum to the right-hand side of your picture. You see Jonathan Aberdeen there as well, because of course there is always a rookie podium as well. The rookie podium will contain Robert Schwartzman on the top step, then it will be Jonathan Aberdeen and Sascha van Estrat. But we look at the celebrations of Mick Schumacher on top of the car. Win number 5, as he indicates. And certainly win number 2 this weekend. Can he make it 3 out of 3? That will be a question that I will pose to him later, because we have a Formula 3 Q&A session a little bit later. Looking forward to that very much. So they're standing by for the podium ceremony. So zooming in on René Rossin there, who is the team boss of Prema Theodore. He's had some extraordinary driver talent through his hands, as have the other teams in the FIA Formula 3 European Championship as well. So not far away from the podium getting underway. I hope. The reason I say that is because DTM quali is about to get underway also. Always a packed program. And there the photographers et al. Await. And Schumacher then studying the timing screen. Kind of what you need to know, Mick, is that you are consistently the quickest. Even your last lap, you were quicker than anybody else. Marcus Armstrong there as well. And here comes the podium ceremony. About to get underway. Overalls back on again. Mr. Ticktum, if you will, please. You've got to look at your best on the podium. Mick Schumacher then makes his way to the top step of the podium for the second time of asking here at the Nürburgring. And Prema Theodore represented, of course, on the podium as well. Robert Schwartzman then is the next to join us on the podium. He, of course, from the same team, another member of the Ferrari Driver Academy, and of course supported by the SMP Racing concern. And there is Dan Ticktum then. National anthem time for Mick Schumacher. So the anthem plays out there, and he puts the Hankook baseball cap on, which says first. So here comes the trophy presentation then. There's Robert Schwartzman. So Schumacher then receives his trophy. And the rest of the drivers will receive theirs, and we say bye-bye for now from Formula 3.